One subject that a lot of beginning improvisers are very interested in and have a lot of questions about is this whole idea of chord extensions. When you hear people talking about 9th chords and 11th chords and 13th chords, what is that and how do we think about it and how do I improvise over that and how do I create all these sounds on my own instrument? And so in this video, I'm going to try to really demystify this concept for you. I'm going to try to show you that you're already playing chord extensions all the time in your improvising. You're just not thinking of it that way. And this video is for everybody, so I'm going to demonstrate some things on the guitar, but even if you play a melodic instrument like the sax or the trumpet or the violin, you can create all of these sounds and you can still create all of these beautiful effects even though you're playing the notes one at a time, so this is relevant to you too. To demonstrate it, I'm going to build a major scale here on my guitar. If this is my note 1, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. That's the major scale in 1 octave. And from there, we create this idea of the chord of this harmonic environment by just taking the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. And so when you hear people talking about a 9th chord, all they're talking about is just continuing with this alternating sequence and tacking another note on top of that. So we got to here by going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we're just going to keep going. 1, 2. That 9th that people talk about is nothing more than note 2 of the next octave. That's all it is. And so if I want to then play something that sounds like a major 9th chord, I just need to take some selection of these notes. And again, if you play a chordal instrument like the guitar or the piano, then you can do this. And I might play these notes here. I'll play 1, and then 3, and then 7. I'm going to omit my 5 because I just don't have enough. I don't have enough strings to play all the notes that I just went through, and so I'll just take some selection of those notes. I'll play the 1, 3, 7, and then I'll play that note 2 on top, and I get this beautiful sound of a major 9th chord. And that's literally all it is. And the 11th and the 13th are the same idea. You just keep extending this alternating sequence going through the scale, and as you get up into the 2nd octave, there's a really interesting contradiction that happens, because notice that I'm saying the 9th is part of the chord. It's a chord note. But what note is it really? It's really just note 2. But wait a second. How can note 2 be a chord note when it's up here and I'm thinking of it as the 9th, but it's not a chord note when I'm starting off from the beginning and I'm playing my 1 and then 3 and I'm purposely omitting the 2 because we say that's not a chord note, right? That's not a note of the 1 chord. Now, fortunately, we don't have to, go to court and prove one interpretation or the other. They're just sounds. They're just notes on your tonal map. I'm just trying to explain to you kind of where these concepts come from and how it's sort of logical to think of it as the 9th and when it might be more logical to think of it as note 2. But in reality, it really is just note 2. Now, the next thing that leads to is the realization that you're already playing these notes all the time. If I'm accompanying you and I'm playing the 1 chord, and you, in your improvising, you play note 1, and then you play note 2, 2, and maybe play 7, go up to 2, and then 3. If that's what you're doing in your improvising, every time you're on that note 2, you and I together are creating this sound of a major 9th chord because you're adding the 2, which we can call the 9th, and I'm adding all the other notes. And so together we're playing a major 9th chord. So you're already doing this when you're improvising. You're just not thinking of it that way. And now I'll show you an even better example where the melody is a little bit more complex and the chords are changing. And what it's going to produce is a whole bunch of chord extensions that sound very sophisticated, even though, as I say, you're already doing this when you're improvising. I'm going to use the progression 2-5-1. It's going to be a 2 chord, it's going to be a 5 chord, and it's going to be a 1 chord. That's what it sounds like. Doesn't matter if you're familiar yet with this 2-5-1 chord progression, or if you know how to play all these notes on your instrument. It doesn't matter. Just follow along. The most important thing is to demystify the idea of these exotic sounding extensions, and I want to show you how they arise so simply and so innocently from a genuine melodic idea that you have. So again, let's say I'm accompanying you and I'm playing 2 and then 5 and then 1, and your idea is when I play this 2 chord, you decide to play note 3. That's note 3 of the key. You're just on note 3 of your tonal map. And when I go to the 5 chord, you can hear this beautiful tension attracting you just below your 3, and you decide to move down to flat 3. And when I go to the 1 chord, now you're on this path chromatically. You were on 3, and now you go down to flat 3, and so you just keep going down to 2, right? Let's say that's your melodic idea. I'm accompanying you with 2, 5, 1, and you're playing 3, flat 3, 2. Well, in doing that, by playing note 3 over the 2 chord, you actually played the 9th, right? You just made this into a minor 9th chord because note 3 has that relationship to the 2 chord. It happens to be the 9th, right? 2, 4, 6, 1, 3, right? That's how I get all the way up to that note 3 in the next octave, which would be the 9th of this chord. And then this is even more interesting. When I go to the 5 chord and you decide to play that flat 3, well, now you're playing either the flatted 13th or the augmented 5th, depending on how you want to call it, of this chord. Because you're on note flat 3 or sharp 2 and relative to 5, that's what it works out to be. And then when I go to the 1 chord, now you're on your note 2, right? And that's the 9th of this chord. So let me ask you this. Was your idea born of wanting to play the 9th of this chord and then the flatted 13th of this chord and then again the 9th of this chord? No, of course not. It was just 3, flat 3, 2. That was your idea. Very simple idea, beautiful melodic idea. But it happens to have this somewhat complex relationship to each chord of the moment, which produces these fancy sounding names. But so when you try to reverse engineer this and you see a piece of paper and it says that this is a dominant chord with a flatted 13th, and you say, oh my God, that's super complicated. I don't understand that. Well, yes, you do. Yes, you do. You just played it yourself. It just happened to be that combination of that particular melodic note with that chord. It has sort of a complex relationship, and so it gets a complex name. But so that's what I'm trying to share with you about, this idea that you're already playing these chord extensions all the time. It's just simply the compound result of a melodic choice and a chord in the background. Now, if that melodic choice happens to be a note that's not one of the 4 basic chord notes, then bingo, you've just produced one of these beautiful chord extension moments. And the last thing I want to share with you is an idea about how you can study these sounds using the IFR tonal map so that you can access them more consciously in your music. You're already, as I said, you're already accessing them. You're already playing these extensions all the time. But if you want to become more aware of that process and grow in your visualization skills, your ability to see the relationships between all of these melodic notes and the chord of the moment, I'm going to show you how I would approach that. First, remember that there's really not that much content in the world of harmony. What we can do with it is infinite, but the basic building blocks aren't that many. And so the mistake we always make is we try to take on too much at once because we think there's just so much out there that I better run through all this stuff. And that's exactly the wrong strategy. Everything in Western music is built up from very, very simple building blocks. And so all the power, all the advantage comes from taking the time to study these basic units one at a time, very calmly, with all the time in the world. And so I would say just take one of these extensions. Let's talk about the 9th, okay? If you've been practicing exercise 3 in IFR, then you're already very familiar with the 4 basic notes that make up the 7 chords of the major scale. The 1 chord is 1, 3, 5, 7. The 2 chord is 2, 4, 6, 1. And then the 3 chord, 3, 5, 7, 2, etc., right? And so all we're going to do is we're going to tack on the 9th to our basic definition of these chords, and we're just going to practice that. Now, through the course of this video, I'm sure you're already very, very clear that the 9th of the 1 chord is just note 2. But let me ask you this. What's the 9th of the 4 chord? What's the 9th of the 6 chord? These are the things that we have to study and learn, and it's very easy. Let's just go through the chords one by one. The 2 chord, 2, 4, 6, 1, 6, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. Right, I have to get all the way up to that 3 if I want to extend the 2 chord to its 9th. So I've been studying the 2 chord as 2, 4, 6, and 1. Now I have to start studying it as 2, 4, 6, 1, 3. Studying that for a bit, if I ask you what is the 9th of the 2 chord, you should be able to tell me that that's note 3. And if we go through all 7 chords in this way, again, taking our time, You can learn that, right? You can just the same way you know what the fifth of any given chord is or what the seventh of any given chord is. Now you can just add to your thinking that you know what the ninth of any given chord is. And that's where all the power is, because you're bringing it back to the tonal map, right? You're not just playing this abstract shape of a ninth chord, but I have no idea how it connects to anything else. You're seeing everything on the same musical landscape. There's one map of all these sounds, and you just know that if I want that beautiful sound of a minor ninth chord in my 2 chord, that ninth, the note that does that, is literally my note 3. And that's what allows me to know where I am in the octave, so I can do melodies like the one I showed you earlier. Okay? So that's how I would suggest you study this. I hope if we've accomplished anything, that at least you're not intimidated by these chord extensions, and that you understand that they really do just come from the major scale, just like everything else. And all we're doing is we're taking kind of the logic of the chord, what led us to the notes 1, 3, 5, 7 in the first place, and we just keep going with that.